Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight, Mayor Lightfoot's plan to sue gang members heads to City Council. We talk with older people about that and other items up for a vote at Wednesday's meeting.
A Russian attack could come any day now. Well, today might be that day.
Tensions between Russia and Ukraine are quickly escalating. We have local perspective.
There's an industry to be built here in Illinois around carpet recycling.
But who should pay for that industry to take off? A debate over a fee on carpeting.
Lead poisoning in children is 100% preventable.
Advocates fight for dedicated funding to remove lead pipes connected to child care facilities.
Since Joe Ferguson's departure in October, Chicago has been without a permanent inspector general. So what's holding up the process?
They have nothing with them. The only thing they have is hope and their dreams to come into reality.
And the emotional journey of Afghan refugees from Kabul to Chicago, where some are now attending college. But first, some of today's top stories. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine intensify. Russian President Vladimir Putin orders troops into two separatist enclaves in eastern Ukraine and signs decrees recognizing the, quote, independence of the breakaway regions. Kremlin watchers fear the Russian leader's latest move could trigger an imminent large-scale invasion of Ukraine by massed Russian forces. The White House says President Joe Biden will soon sign an executive order imposing sanctions on the separatist regions, but for now, not on Russia. And we'll have more on those tensions in Ukraine coming up in the program. The normalization of trauma and systemic racial inequity is worsening the mental health of young black and brown men. That's according to a new study looking at the mental health of young men of color throughout the pandemic. The study was itself conducted by black and brown men between the ages of 14 and 21 who are part of a group called Ujima in conjunction with Lurie Children's Hospital and Communities United. The groups revealed the study at a news conference today.
We know the issues and we are here to take the stand. Stand with us in changing the beat of mental health for boys and young men of color.
Among the report's key findings, a deep connection between systemic inequity and mental health, with young black and brown men often internalizing blame for that, the normalization of trauma for young men of color, and the lack of systems to support their mental health. A 60-year-old man is in serious condition after an extra alarm fire in Albany Park early this morning. The fire gutted an apartment building and destroyed two neighborhood businesses. It's believed to have started at around 3:45 this morning in an apartment building on the 4300 block of North Richmond. The blaze quickly spread to the Twisted Hippo Brewery and the Ultimate Ninjas Gym. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Up next, we check in with some members of City Council ahead of Wednesday's meeting. Stay with us.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
City Council is set to take up the mayor's controversial ordinance that would allow police to seize suspected gang members' assets. The mayor has called it an essential tool in the effort to bring down Chicago's homicide rate, but opponents like civil liberties groups say the law would not deter crime and instead would open the city up to a flood of lawsuits. Joining us to talk about that and other items on City Council's agenda are 15th Ward Alderman Ray Lopez, who represents parts of the South Side, 20th Ward Alderperson Jeanette Taylor, who represents part of the South Side as well, and Alderperson Maria Haddon of the 49th Ward, who represents parts of the far north side, including Rogers Park. We'd hoped to be joined by Alderman Jason Irvin, chair of the Black Caucus, but he is unable to join us. We are glad that you are all here. First up, Alderman Lopez, that controversial ordinance that would allow police to seize the assets of suspected gang members, it passed committee. It is up for a full vote this week. Is there any evidence that something like this would deter crime?
I don't think the evidence that they presented, which was minimal at best during the Public Safety Committee, shows that this is going to be an effective tool. It sounds nice. And originally, when the mayor introduced it, it was called the Gang Asset Forfeiture Ordinance, renamed now the Victims Justice Ordinance. But none of this is going to deter crime in the city of Chicago because we're treating crime and gang activity like we're from the 1920s during the Prohibition. Gangs do not have large amounts of assets. Gangs do not have organized structure anymore. They haven't had that since Operation Halo came and took out all their leadership. Gangs are fractured. Gangs are running around only with the money in their pocket. And this is going to net all the wrong people and all the wrong assets and cause too harmful a process to clear oneself in order to be effective. The only thing in terms of crime is accountability.
Alderwoman Maria Haddon, what about that point? And that is the major opposition on the part of civil rights groups that say people will unsuspectingly get cars or other assets taken from them because they're suspected to be in a gang, but perhaps they're not in a gang. So what about those concerns?
I agree with my colleague, Alderman Lopez, and I want to add, too, that while a lot of our discussions have been on the asset seizure, police can already seize the assets and cash of gang members. We already can do that. We have an existing law in the books that allows them to do that, and they do that, right? It's working with the state's attorney's office. One of the other concerns is this is a diversion. We all want to be finding ways to make our city safer, but right now, we're looking at a piece of legislation that would cost the taxpayer an enormous amount of wasted time. So between 100 to 1,500 hours, according to the law department, which ranges for our in-house law department from about $7,000 to up to $100,000 in potential costs and time of people not doing other work that we need the law department to do. The City of Chicago's law department is not a prosecutorial body. Right? We have a police department, we have a state's attorney. And so, you know, we're spending time that we'd all rather be spending really trying to find solutions, right, to crime, to poverty, to investing in social services. And now we're fighting an ordinance that will likely violate people's civil rights and cause unnecessary harm to our residents.
It seems like the consensus here is this ordinance is not the way to go. Alderwoman Taylor, would an ordinance like this violate people's civil rights?
Of course it would. This is nothing but a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. You're re-victimizing. And then it says if. So these people are guilty already before going to court, and we're seizing stuff that belongs to them. That's not what you do. Take the money that we have and take care of the people in the city. People don't sell drugs and do illegal stuff when they're making a living wage. It's like, stop it. We could afford to take care of people in our community, and this is definitely not the way.
All right, Alderman Lopez, opposition here, but it did narrowly pass the Public Safety Committee. Does that mean it's a cinch to pass in the overall City Council this week?
I don't know if it's guaranteed to pass. There are still a lot of people who are not part of that committee who will be able to vote on Wednesday. There's other procedural things we can do. But we have to look at, as my colleague said, what the law department was designed to do. And when you look at the law department's history, they can't even hold vacant lot owners accountable for their properties. How are you going to expect the law department to now go after gangbangers and figure out assets and what to take and what not to take? It's just simply not feasible. Just a headline grab, as my colleague said.
All right. Also up for vote on Wednesday is this settlement of $1.67 million to the victims of being dragged from a car at the Brickyard Mall on the northwest side. Alderwoman Haddon, should this settlement be approved?
Yes, the settlement should be approved, and most importantly, we should never have had to have a consideration on this settlement. The behavior exhibited in the video evidence and in the COPA investigation, which was supported, right, by the Superintendent Brown, the behavior of the police officers and how they treated these people was completely unacceptable. It was like watching a Rodney King video. The violence, the brutality was textbook unnecessary. It's the reason we're in a consent decree. So yes, I'll be supporting the settlement. Everyone in council should. And I know that we don't, not everyone on the call, we're not all in agreement on this one.
Well, Alderwoman Taylor, one of your colleagues, Alderman Sposato, said he thought that those folks in that car were going to go loot because they're from North Lawndale. That got a sharp rebuke. Your reaction to those comments from your colleagues?
You're talking about the same colleague that called us communists? I'm not surprised. You all shouldn't be either. At the end of the day, the video doesn't lie. But the question we should ask is, what if we didn't have the video? The first thing people would have said is they went to loot. And so, because this is a black woman, she went to go loot. They were looting. Like, make it make sense. We got to get to a place in City Council where we see stuff in black and white and not Technicolor the way we want to see it. It was obvious. what happened. And so she deserves to be compensated. And remember, this money can never get back her dignity and her pride. Same thing with Anjanette Young. No matter how much money we give them, they can't get back what was taken from them. A sense of safety from the people who are paid to serve and protect. They're picking and choosing who they serve and protect.
All right, Alderman Lopez, Alderwoman Haddon referred to someone on this panel that's not in favor of this settlement. I assume that's you, your position on this.
No, I did not vote in support of this settlement, and I will not be voting in support of it on Wednesday. You know, I understand and have always supported settlements when, you know, our police officers were in the wrong, clearly. But I think that there's a question lingering in my mind as to not only the story and scenario of what happened, but also the totality of what was going on that day. This was one of the most egregious days in Chicago's history where people were literally trying to destroy this city. And if this had happened at 9 o'clock in the morning, I could understand someone saying I was unaware. But this was at 3 in the afternoon when literally all hell was breaking loose in the city of Chicago. And I just have some unresolved answers that the law department, quite frankly, could not answer. It did not answer. And I think it's our responsibility to ask those tough questions in these circumstances, just as I've done for other scenarios and lawsuits where I've had questions about whether or not it's appropriate for taxpayer dollars to be used to make people whole.
All right, only a few seconds left, though, but also unresolved. Alderwoman Haddon, the confirmation of the new head of COPA, Andrea Kirsten, will that go forward, do you believe?
I believe so. I don't think there's any good reason why it shouldn't. There's no good reason why it shouldn't. It's another matter of some of our colleagues wanting history to be rewritten because of an offense that was taken, but we need to separate those offenses. And just a short comment to Alderman Lopez's point, it doesn't matter what or why those people were there at the Brickyard Mall. The behavior was unacceptable, and there's no one in City Council that can justify that. Completely unacceptable. There's no scenario under which almost a dozen officers should have bashed out windows, pulled law-abiding citizens or not from their vehicles, and brutalized them.
All right, we're going to have to leave it right there right now, but we'll be joined again by the older people later in the program to discuss the latest developments in the ward remap. But for now, our thanks to City Council members Ray Lopez, Jeanette Taylor, and Maria Haddon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Paris.
And now to Brandis and the latest tensions on the Ukraine border. Brandis.
In Paris, as we mentioned earlier, an imminent large-scale invasion of Ukraine could be in the works by massed Russian forces as Russian President Vladimir Putin orders troops into 2 separatist enclaves in eastern Ukraine while recognizing the independence of those regions. Here to help us unpack the latest developments are Julian Hayda, a Ukrainian-American journalist who now has residency in Ukraine. Hayda is joining us from London after he was not able to go to Ukraine due to security concerns. Cecile Shea, a non-resident senior fellow on security and diplomacy at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Ian Kelly, the ambassador in residence at Northwestern University. Kelly was formerly the U.S. ambassador to Georgia, and prior to that, he was the U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And John Mearsheimer, a political science professor at the University of Chicago. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Ambassador Kelly, let's start with you, please. U.S. officials had warned that Russia could invade as soon as today. Where do things stand right now tonight?
Today was a very dramatic day. It seemed that minute by minute there were big developments, big announcements, and I think what really made things different today, of course, was the recognition of the 2 regions as independent, and the decision of Putin to send in what he calls peacekeeping forces into these regions, which of course would constitute a violation of Ukraine's sovereignty by crossing that border. So, I mean, everybody's wondering if this means the beginning of a wider war, and we don't know. I think it is much more likely given Putin's speech today, but we don't know how broad this development will be.
Cecile Shea, remind us, what is the main issue here? Why is President Putin doing this?
Well, why is he doing it, and what the main issue with are kind of 2 different questions. But they are related. Why is he doing it? It's very difficult to explain a lot of President Putin's behavior. He is more of a tactician than a strategist. He does things very often because he can. Since 2014, he has waged a combination of a proxy war and other types of pressure. Russia went into the Crimea and annexed the Crimea, a part of the Ukraine, of Ukraine. Old habits die hard. And there has been a low-level conflict in eastern Ukraine since 2014, leading to thousands of Ukrainian deaths there. So there's been a conflict going on now for quite some time. But then for whatever combination of reasons, Putin recently has decided that he wants to up the ante, moved hundreds of thousands of troops to the border, the Ukraine-Belarus border. And according to the U.S. administration and many other countries around the world, is prepared to invade part or even all of the Ukraine. And that's really the question now is, will he go to Kiev? He claims two things. One is that the section of eastern Ukraine where he has in secret been fighting a proxy war for a number of years now, and now today has come out publicly and said that Russia is going to be involved in eastern Ukraine. He claims that he is protecting Russians who are living in Ukraine. There's no evidence that Russians were in any way endangered in that section. And more recently, he has built this entire mythology of Russia's claims to Ukraine, that Ukraine owes its existence to Russia, that Ukraine was created by Russia, that they are really one country and one language. And no Ukrainian is going to agree with that. Indeed, if anything, Ukrainians have moved even further away from Russia over the last year than they already were.
And as we've mentioned, of course, Putin has ordered troops into those two separatist enclaves in eastern Ukraine, signing decrees recognizing the independence of those breakaway regions. John Mearsheimer, could this make an invasion all the more likely?
I don't think so. I mean, it's impossible to tell exactly what the calculations are that are going through his head. So we can only surmise what he's likely to do. Won't invade Ukraine. And there are two sets to that. One is that the costs would be enormous. First of all, economic sanctions would automatically be put on Russia, and that would really damage the Russian economy. Furthermore, occupying Ukraine would not be easy. The Russians know, and we know from occupying places like Afghanistan and Iraq, this is a terribly difficult task. There's almost always resistance. You want to remember that when the Russians occupied Eastern Europe, or the Soviets occupied Eastern Europe during the Cold War, they had all sorts of problems. They had to invade Hungary in 56. They had to invade Czechoslovakia in 68. It's a messy business. So I think the costs are great. And I think he doesn't need to invade to accomplish his goals. He's getting the attention that he wanted. The world is focused on what he wants. He's made it clear that Ukraine is not going to become part of NATO. And at this point, it's almost impossible to see how Ukraine will become part of NATO. And furthermore, I believe that he's sowing divisions within the West that will manifest themselves over time. So I think if he's smart, he'll just sit back and continue to pull the levers as he's been doing over the past year or so. And he'll drive us into a lather and cause us all sorts of problems. And in the end, he'll get what he wants because Ukraine is not going to become part of NATO.
I want to get Julian Hayda in here, obviously having some strong connections in Ukraine. What are Ukrainians feeling right now? Do they think a Russian invasion is likely?
Well, Ukrainians are very quick to remind anybody who asks if an invasion is likely that Ukraine has already been in a state of war for the last 8 years since 2014. You know, will there be an invasion? If you look at reports from various independent bodies and digital forensics journalists, there have been Russian forces not only in Crimea, but in the occupied eastern regions already. So to send troops there is an invasion because the internationally recognized borders of Ukraine include Donetsk and Luhansk. So, you know, Ukrainians want peace. The president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, gave an address to the nation about an hour ago. He said, and this is a direct quote, I just translated it, a country that has been supporting war for the last 8 years cannot say it stands for peace, which is, of course, what Russia is saying. Russia is saying that it is protecting its own interests in the name of peace. But the reality just doesn't play that out. And regarding the question of NATO, did Ukraine invite this? Frankly, I find it victim blaming. Ukrainians didn't ask for war. Ukrainians are rather ambivalent as results, as evident by the last presidential elections, ambivalent towards the West, but decidedly have distrusted Russia and increasingly are united given Russia's actions towards Ukraine.
Julian, quickly, how do you believe President Biden and his administration have handled this situation?
Well, it's really difficult to say. Many people in Ukraine are asking, why did the United States respond to Russian antagonism now of all times? But I think that is now behind us, given the fact that Russia's provocation of Ukraine has already begun to take lives. And so I'd really, want to focus on the fact that Ukrainians do hope for a peaceful solution to this conflict. They are very, appreciative of Western support, but 70% of Ukrainians don't believe that there is necessarily a diplomatic solution to this, which is alarming.
Ambassador Kelly, what do we know about this alleged list of Ukrainians that Russia has identified if it does, in fact, invade and occupy the country?
Well, it's very chilling news, first of all, and I think it also I think indicates the intention of Russia to try and change the regime in Kyiv, and that's what I find most disturbing. And there were plenty of signals of that in this hour-long speech by Putin, where he basically called the government in Kyiv illegitimate, called it a Western colony with a puppet regime, even claimed that Ukraine was developing nuclear weapons and that this was a real, a present danger for Russia. So that's why this speech today, I think, really ratcheted up the stakes and made clear that if Putin follows through on what he said today about the dangers that he says the Zelensky government represents to Russia, it'll be hard for him not to try and decapitate the leadership in Kyiv and try to install another government.
Certainly not
but
an
as John
uncomplicated.
says, that means occupation, and I don't think he wants to take that on, too.
Well, all eyes on Russia. It's certainly not an uncomplicated situation, but we will have to leave it there. My thanks to Julian Hayda, Cecile Shea, Ambassador Ian Kelly, and John Mearsheimer for joining us.
Thank you.
And now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. High lead levels in water can have devastating health effects, especially for children. Damage to the brain and nervous system, learning, and behavioral issues. It's a problem acutely felt in Illinois, which has an estimated 700,000 lead service lines and 1 million more of unknown origin. That's more than any other state. Governor J.B. Pritzker's proposed budget has nearly $500 million in federal money to tackle the problem. But as Chicago Tonight's Nick Blumberg reports, some advocates want more funding, in particular to remove lead pipes connected to child care facilities.
Back in 2017, the state of Illinois began requiring daycares to test the lead levels in their water and come up with a mitigation plan if they found any. El Hogar del Niño, which serves families in Pilsen and Little Village, discovered it had a handful of water fixtures with high lead levels.
What we do exceptionally well here at El Hogar del Niño is early childhood. What we don't do well, or at least what we are not familiar with, are complex environmental issues.
But they got help through the nonprofit Elevate, which installed water filters and eventually got the lead service line connected to the building replaced.
Had we been required to change those out on our own, we would have had to have removed resources from the classrooms to do that work. And so when you're working with vulnerable children and families like we do, or any children, that's just not an option that you want to exercise.
In recent years, a patchwork of government and nonprofit programs has come together offering help with testing and mitigation. But the need still far outstrips the available assistance, especially for high-priority places like childcare facilities.
So it's really going to take a village to tackle this issue. But the good thing is we know how to do it.
About 20% of licensed childcare facilities in Illinois have told the state they found lead in their water, though not all of those are necessarily fixtures used for drinking water. Elevate's Caroline Packenham says the providers they've worked with are even more likely to face high lead levels.
Depending on what type of facility you're in, we were finding that between 30 and 50% of providers were finding lead in their drinking water. We would really love to see statewide assistance.
Governor J.B. Pritzker's budget proposal includes $565 million in loans and grants to replace lead service lines. But that's all money from the federal infrastructure package. Some advocates want the state to kick in $300 million of its own funding, $60 million of which would be dedicated to child care facilities.
The health and well-being of our children is worth it to put that money aside and make sure we have enough to make sure every child care facility is free of a lead service line.
Justin Williams says his group's had positive conversations with the governor's office about its proposal. As he sees it, it's not just that children are especially vulnerable, it's also about racial equity.
Black and Latinx Illinoisans are twice as likely as white Illinoisans to be living in the communities that contain almost all of the state's lead service lines. We really need to make sure we're not leaving this problem literally at the feet of people of color in Illinois.
There is work underway in the General Assembly. Last year, State Representative Lamont Robinson sponsored a successful bill requiring water utilities around the state to document lead service lines and come up with a plan to replace them.
We removed lead out of paint, but we have not done this in our water.
But eliminating service lines is a long-term effort. Depending on the scope of the problem, utilities have between 15 and 34 years to replace lead pipes by law. In the meantime, Robinson's pushing a bill this year that carves out $50 million to send free water filters to people who need them.
We know that we don't have enough money to replace all lead pipes, and while we're waiting on those funds, we need to do something right now.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg.
Robinson also says he's supportive of the idea to add more state funding to remove lead pipes. The governor's office did not respond to a request for comment on the proposal. And up next, Chicago's gone without an inspector general for several months now. A checkup on the progress to select the next city watchdog right after this.
Thousands of Puerto Ricans are taking to the streets to protest massive blackouts.
Over the years, Mexican culture, from food to music, has become woven into the city's tapestry.
Medical professionals share the latest recommendations on COVID-19 booster shots.
DACA recipients have been facing longer delays than normal in their status renewal.
Little Village is one of my favorite neighborhoods. This neighborhood comes together to celebrate such an important day in our culture.
Chicago has been without a permanent inspector general for more than 4 months as the search for replacement continues without any signs of progress. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. And Heather, why does it matter that Chicago has not had a city council confirmed watchdog since October?
Well, the Inspector General is the only city official who is charged with investigating wrongdoing and malfeasance in city agencies and on the city council itself. This post has been vacant at a time when one alderperson has been convicted of federal crimes and 2 others are awaiting trial after pleading not guilty to bribery and corruption charges. So there is a lot going on at City Hall, and the question is anybody watching with this post vacant for such a long time?
And why is it taking so long?
Well, it is a complicated process to get a new inspector general confirmed, but essentially they got started late and it's not clear how much progress they've made since then. Inspector General Joe Ferguson left office in mid-October after warning in July that his term was just about up, but the city council and the mayor did not take any action to start the process to replace him until September. And since then, any progress that's been made has been behind closed doors and completely shut off from the public or the news media.
And what is the process, Heather, for finding the next inspector general?
Well, there is a 5-person search committee that's reviewing applications submitted for this position, and then their job is to recommend finalists to Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who has the final say on who should serve as Inspector General, and then they have to be confirmed by the City Council. But we don't know what that committee's process has been, whether the mayor has reviewed any finalists or even interviewed them, and what sort of timeline she's looking at to get this post filled.
And is this the only, high-profile position at City Hall that's been vacant for months?
It is not. The head of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability has been without a permanent City Council confirmed leader since May. That could change this week. The nomination of Andrea Kirsten is set for a full vote by the Chicago City Council, but it's not clear that she has enough votes to be confirmed. Her nomination has been mired in controversy after her agency issued a report recommending discipline for slain officer Ella French months after she was killed in the line of duty.
Right, a lot to keep an eye on. Nobody keeping an eye on it except Heather Sharon, of course. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. And now, Paris, we toss it back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. And still to come on Chicago tonight, Illinois is considering a carpet stewardship program. We'll tell you exactly what that means and what it might cost you. City health officials reject a permit to allow a recycling operation on Chicago's southeast side. We talk with older people about that and other city business. Plus, the 7-month journey from Kabul, Afghanistan to Chicago, where a group of refugees is now attending college. But first, some more of today's top stories. No bail for a man who allegedly shot and killed his brother. This after an argument turned physical early Sunday morning. Prosecutors say 25-year-old Darren Hardy took a rifle and fatally shot his older brother Darnell Hardy at around 3:50 a.m. on Sunday. Darnell Hardy was pronounced dead at the scene. Darren Hardy has been charged with first-degree murder. In just 1 week, Illinois is set to lift its indoor mask mandate, assuming key metrics keep trending in the right direction. But it's still unclear as to whether Chicago will join the rest of the state and lift its mask mandate as well, although late last week, Chicago Public Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady said she was, quote, feeling optimistic. An announcement on changing masking requirements within the city is expected later this week. And we'll hear from a panel of older people about their thoughts on that city mask mandate coming up in a few minutes. Bad news for folks still using a 3G phone. Starting tomorrow, AT&T is ending its 3G service, meaning many older smartphones and other devices, such as some e-book readers, will no longer function. Wireless networks are moving to shut down their 3G services in order to make space for faster 5G service. T-Mobile says it will end its 3G service by July 1st, Verizon by the end of the year. And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. It's one thing to recycle aluminum cans or paper, but what about carpeting? Illinois is considering a proposal to facilitate that, but the effort has wall-to-wall complications. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Yeah, Brandis, as somebody who has spent countless hours on the gorgeous but very hard marble floors of the Illinois State Capitol, I got to tell you, I appreciate a nice lush carpet. Beyond that, and I suppose also, admiring a stylish floor now and again, I haven't really thought much about what carpets are made of. Now, Mike Grady, he's the lobbyist for Partners for Environmental Responsibility. He has.
They're made of plastic. They're all made of different types of polymers. So basically, you've got your, all those fibers and everything are ultimately made of plastic.
When it's the end of the road for a rug, 99% of the time they go to a landfill, but it doesn't have to be that way. Companies have developed methods to process old carpeting, grinding it down to essentially a pulp so it can be restored to plastic feedstock.
Anything that's made of plastic starts from plastic feedstock, whether it's the bottle you use for your Tide detergent, the bottle you drink your bottled water out of, or anything else that's made of plastic, including, the siding on your house or decking for the back of your house. All of those things can be made from the recycled feedstock that comes from carpet.
State Representative Robin Gable is sponsor of a plan that would, roll out the carpet for these companies to come to Illinois to do that recycling work. In a hearing recently, Gable says several have said that they would come to Illinois and in the meanwhile make good use of currently vacant warehouse space and also create a whole lot of jobs if Illinois passes a measure to make it commercially feasible. She says that would be good for the environment too.
The goal of this law is aggressive. It is to achieve a carpet recycling rate in Illinois of 25% by the end of 2026. Achieving this goal means Illinois would reduce its greenhouse gas emission by over 146,560 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent each year.
Her Carpet Stewardship Act calls for carpet producers to finance this recycling program. Grady says that it is the responsibility of manufacturers, and if they're paying the tab, he says carpet recycling would come at no cost and no extra inconvenience to customers.
If a carpet installer comes to your house and puts new flooring in, puts new carpet in, and takes the old carpet and padding out, nothing is going to change for the consumer. The installer will then simply just take it to the same landfill or transfer station or wherever else they were taking it before. Only now those places that they took it would be registered as collectors by the state, and they would then make that, and then they would divert on site the carpet away from the rest of the garbage that comes in, and then the recyclers of carpet would come and haul that stuff off so that they can begin breaking it down.
But Illinois Manufacturers Association CEO Mark Denzler says that advocates are trying to pull the carpet wool over consumers' eyes. He says if producers' costs rise, of course that's going to be passed on to customers.
There's no two ways about it. Nothing is free in this world, as you know. And this is especially the time where we're seeing record inflation. We've seen inflation rise at 7.5% over the last 12 months, the highest since 1982. We think it's the wrong time to impose new taxes and fees on consumers who want to put carpet in their homes.
He says that the impact on landfills may not be huge, but it could have a very big impact on both consumers, those costs, but also on jobs, he says, that need to be protected. Illinois doesn't actually have carpet manufacturers, but Denzler says that a whole industry of carpet dealers and installers would feel the pain if carpet sales slide. California has implemented a similar program, and Denzler says that data from there shows that prices went up and carpet sales dropped 30%.
And it's been replaced by floorings that are produced outside the United States. And so this is kind of an anti-American manufacturing bill that's going to force a lot of people to buy cheaper and inferior products that are produced overseas as opposed to carpet that's produced right here in the United States. We have to keep in mind that carpet accounts for less than 2% of all landfill in the United States, but it's very expensive, it's very heavy.
And he says that if carpet is left out, if it gets wet, it can't be reused. All issues, he says, that make carpet recycling complicated. He says that that is among the good reasons that Illinois attempts to institute something like that have stalled in the recent past. Advocates, though, say that Illinois is poised to be a leader in the Midwest in this so-called circular economy, and that legislators should be primed to welcome new manufacturing jobs here versus protecting carpet manufacturers that are largely based in Georgia. With that, back to you, Brandis.
Amanda, thank you. And now to Paris with more from members of City Council. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. Early in the program, we discussed the mayor's controversial ordinance that would allow the city to sue gang members. And now we're joined again by the alder people once more. Let's start with this remap news. Alderman Lopez, a coalition of community groups, is now deciding to back the map put forth by the Latino caucus. How does this change the dynamic?
Well, I think the fact that a number of independent and progressive organizations are supporting the coalition map highlights the fact that that map has broader support than just the 16 members of the city council that signed on to it. That map is more in line with what the data shows. It keeps neighborhoods together. It is more cohesive. And I think that is what is gravitating more people to it. And I would hope that their continued support builds and bodes well for that map.
Alderwoman Taylor, what about that? One of the sticking points for the community groups was not breaking up Englewood into so many wards, so the Latino caucus map breaks it up into 2 wards instead of 5. Is that a good proposal?
No, it is not. What we should have done was work together, and there's still hope for me that we all could work together to come up with a map that we all agree with. While I agree that we should have community input, this process should have been a little bit longer. We should have started this in January. And so how do people who don't really have an insight, and don't get me wrong, I'm new. This is my first remap. I haven't learned as much as I would like doing the remap. And so how do people who have no knowledge of what mapping is go and make a map without the input of the people who are actually elected and paid to do a remap? And so go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead and finish, Alderwoman Taylor.
Yeah, so this has been difficult for some of us, especially us rookies. In everything that we do in city council, I haven't really learned much in this process. And so this is one of the processes that I'm not happy with. And I'm hoping that we could create legislation in the state and in the city to change how we do remapping.
And Alderwoman Haddon, at issue here is the number of Latino majority wards versus African-American majority wards backed by the Latino caucus versus the African-American caucus. So what is the linchpin here to a compromise?
I feel like we've had a lot of good discussions and gotten really close, right, to identifying compromises. So between the coalition map, which I'll say, right, the coalition map is a good effort at putting forth a draft, just like the council map is a great effort at putting forth a draft, just like the people's map is a good effort at putting forth a draft. But as Alderwoman Taylor said, this is complex. I do think that compromise and figuring out what's really in the best interest of the city is that key. And one thing with the people's map, joining with the coalition map that I think is important that people know is that they didn't sign off on the coalition map. They signed off with an agreement on the coalition map, and they're proposing some changes. So I think we've seen a version 2 of the coalition map that's been put out, but it's important for voters to know that the coalition already filed a referendum. And right now, they cannot change that map. So even though both of the groups are together, the version 1 that was introduced as a referendum, that's what's going to referendum now, not the version 2 that they're circulating.
This whole process, of course, gets very weedy, and we should just clarify for viewers the coalition map is the map supported by the Latino caucus. Also, Alderman Lopez, early in the show, we spoke with Heather Sharon about the city's slow-moving process to replace Inspector General Joe Ferguson. He's been gone for 4 months now. Why is this process taking so long?
You know, that's a question for the ages, Paris. We've seen from this administration the foot dragging in replacing department heads, not only with the Inspector General, but throughout a number of the departments that have been operating either with only acting commissioners, acting directors, or with nobody at the helm at all. You know, the municipal code is specific that the mayor has 30 days to start filling appointments. There's a very specific process when it comes to the Inspector General. And I think that this highlights the problem that Mayor Lightfoot has, which is walking and chewing gum at the same time. This is a department head that is integral to improving the efficiency and efficacy of the city of Chicago. We've seen where the Inspector General reports help us craft policies that streamline processes and save taxpayers money. And to have that body, that organization, that department listless without a leader is just unacceptable at this point.
And Alderwoman Taylor, it seems like we're hearing nothing about any progress. I mean, are the wheels in motion at all? Are there any finalists? Is anyone talking about anything with regards to the IG?
That was something you would have to ask the mayor. While in history, We were part of those conversations in this administration. We're not a part of a lot of these conversations. So just as much as you're in the dark, so are we. And we are anticipating, like Alderman Lopez said, it's 30 days. And so we're way past that. But that seems to be what this administration does. This is slow walking. And now we're in a time where our communities depend on us. We cannot slow walk in this process.
All right, speaking of communities, Alderwoman Maria Hadden, late last week, the city and the mayor's administration decided to deny a permit to the company that owns General Iron to operate a metal scrapper on the southeast side, even though a health report said that it would not adversely impact the health of residents. Was this the right move by the city?
It absolutely was the right move. And I believe the health report didn't say it wouldn't adversely impact. It said that it incrementally wouldn't make it any worse, basically, than it already is, which I think is a huge difference. Neighbors on the southeast side and I'd say supporters around the city, including myself and residents here in the 49th Ward, have been supporting this fight to deny the permit. So this was absolutely the right move, not just for the residents, right, in the southeast side who are most directly impacted, but also in deciding what kind of future city Chicago is going to be. We've got to turn away from a lot of the dirty industries. We've got to find a new path. So this was the right decision. I was happy to see the mayor and our Department of Public Health make that call.
And this was a decision that community groups, environmental groups praised. Alderman Ray Lopez, the company that owns General Iron, obviously did not praise the decision, saying they're going to go forward with a lawsuit against the city because they believe the city went back on an agreement. Could the city be liable for millions of dollars in damages here?
Well, I know that the company spent over $85 million upgrading that site, upgrading their facilities, on the understanding that the city was going to approve this permit. And what this crisis has shown us is that the mayor played both sides. She fabricated a crisis in the southeast side of Chicago so that she could finally become a friend of the environmentalists, all the while telling businesses that you are still welcome to do business in the city of Chicago. Now, I agree with Alderwoman Hadden. We need to expand our economic base and expand the amount of industries that we have, particularly focused on green energy and things that are renewable and healthy. But at the same time, there are 200 families that just received layoff notices because we've now said that they can no longer operate at the facility that they've been working at for nearly 4 decades.
So the debate goes on there. Really quickly, Alderwoman Taylor, we're about a week away from the date where the city ostensibly is going to lift the indoor mask mandate. Is the city ready for this?
No, we're not. There are plenty of council members. I was just having this conversation while on break. Plenty of council members have COVID, and we are sitting 6 feet apart from each other. We are not. What we're going to see is Black and Latinx folks die at a higher rate, and we're going to start to see other people, and then they'll institute the mandate. It's the same thing that happened in August of last year. If we would have stayed on, and I'm calling it COVID punishment because it feels like punishment, if we would have stayed with having businesses still be flexible and closed, we would not be in a crisis. But look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. And you're starting to see more young people who are hospitalized. And so this is a mistake. For folks who are saying this is a hoax, it's not real, we need to let up. You are not going to a funeral every week like we are. You are not trying to figure out how to help families to get medicine and the basic things that they need. And so this is a mistake.
All right, COVID's still very much present, even though that rate has gone down. And our thanks to Alder people Ray Lopez, Jeanette Taylor, and Maria Hadden. Thank you so much. And up next inside, a college program for refugees who've relocated from Afghanistan to Chicago in recent months. But first, we take a look at the weather. Seven months ago, they were running for their lives in Kabul after the government of Afghanistan fell into the hands of the Taliban. Now, as many as 3,000 Afghan refugees could ultimately settle in Illinois, most of those in the Chicago area. More than a dozen are not only calling Chicago home, they began attending college in January on a one-year scholarship. It's the beginning of a new chapter for a group of students who have been on a harrowing journey. Saima Zawari is in her first semester at Northeastern Illinois University, studying for a degree in information technology.
I take like 4 classes.
Okay. What's your favorite?
Macroeconomics is my favorite.
Zawari says she felt she no longer had a future in Afghanistan after the country fell to the Taliban over the span of 10 days last August, following the chaotic U.S. withdrawal.
I just came to the airport and decided to find a way to come in.
She says she feared for her life as Taliban militias blocked her route to the Kabul airport.
It was really scary. They had like big guns with them. They were like hitting the men, then women.
Zawari says she was able to get through to the airport, controlled at the time by American security forces, and onto a plane with the aid of an Afghan interpreter. Her journey took her from Kabul to Kuwait to Germany, then an overseas flight to Washington, D.C., then to a refugee camp in New Mexico, where she learned of a scholarship program offered by Northeastern Illinois. She applied and was accepted.
I was like too emotional and start crying that, oh my God, at the Chicago, I got a chance to continue my education. It was really like incredible for me.
Now, Zawari lives in a student dorm with 4 other Afghan refugees. Mewand Poyar is another Afghan scholarship recipient. He's a graduate student working toward his MBA. But he began his study at Northeastern in 2020 and traveled home to Afghanistan with his family for summer break in 2021. The timing proved to be catastrophic.
I got a text message from one of my friends that take your flight, and as soon as you can go out, you have to go.
Poyar says it took 5 separate attempts to get into the airport. He and his family then spent 3 days inside waiting for a flight out.
Everyone was just sitting on the ground, laying on the ground, on the streets, the dust, the sand, the cars were moving, military and everything.
They eventually made it back to Chicago after being held at a refugee camp in Wisconsin. Poyar resumed studying at Northeastern, where he first approached the school's board of trustees and asked them if they could fund scholarships for his fellow refugees.
I didn't believe it. After 1 hour, one of the board of trustees amazed me. She told me that the request is accepted right away.
Northeastern President Gloria Gibson says the school approved 17 scholarships in total exclusively for Afghan refugees. She says the program aligns with the mission of the school, where the student body is majority non-white and more than 80 languages are spoken on campus.
Diversity is an integral part of the fabric of our institution. We have many first-generation students and Pell-eligible students, and we have a welcoming environment as we embrace diversity.
And Gibson says the scholarship funds much more than tuition, room and board, and textbooks.
They also had basic needs: food, clothing, medicine, make sure that they are healthy.
One of the things that we thought would be helpful is to help you get together and share your experiences.
The university says mental health access and group counseling have been key to integrating the students into academic life.
There's a lot of anxiety, there's the fear of the unknown, there's a lot of homesickness, there's a lot of traumatic experiences that they probably saw during the time of the airlift. Some of these students had to spend months going from one American air base to another.
Matteo Farzaneh is an associate professor of history at Northeastern Illinois and faculty advisor for the Afghan students. He is an Iranian American and speaks Farsi, the students' native language. He says another part of the challenge has been acclimating school faculty and staff to Afghan culture.
For example, in Afghan culture, there might not be this freedom of voicing your opinion. So that comes in as a problem probably if you're in a class.
They're really kind with us. They say that if you have any problem, just let us know, and after that we will solve that together.
Northeastern is a small public university without a large endowment, which makes it a challenge to fund all of the resources required for the Afghan program. University officials tabbed the entire cost of these one-year scholarships at more than $500,000. So far, they say they've only raised $60,000 toward that total. but they say they eventually hope to raise enough to cover all 4 years.
Northeastern is not a wealthy institution financially, but we are wealthy in other ways.
Dr. Gibson acknowledges the school will have to rely on foundation and donor support to make the program work. She says the dreams of students like Poyar and Zawari are on the line.
It was kind of my dream to get a scholarship in America. It was America was my dream country. Now I'm here. It's kind of incredible and miracle in my life.
Northeastern Illinois' president says they're still waiting on 4 of the 17 scholarship students to arrive. DePaul University, a private institution, says it has welcomed 10 students who were recently displaced due to the crisis in Afghanistan. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7 for a WTTW News special. Segregation in Chicago. How a creative project involving maps is helping bring understanding to local communities.
That and much more as WTTW launches Firsthand Segregation. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.